People love to dump on Ringo. What is that all about? It's so stupid. The reasons are usually baseless and superficial and lack an understanding into crucial elements that surround productive, prolific creativity. His value and contributions to the Beatles cannot be understated. The first thing we need to do is look at the ego. We all have it. It's a part of the human condition. Do you think it would be possible to be in a band like the Beatles and not have some sort of ego? It's undeniable. And yet, when you consider Ringo in whatever medium is available, the last thing you think about is ego of any kind. This is most paramount in his playing. There's nothing flashy about Ringo Starr's drumming. I think this notion contributes to a lot of the snipes that he can sometimes receive from fans and critics alike. A quote from British comedian Jasper Carrott in 1983 has been wrongly attributed to John Lennon 2 years after his death, mind you, saying that Ringo is not even the best drummer in the Beatles. You'll also hear various myths about how Paul McCartney went back into the studio to play over Ringo's tracks, and a similar story featuring drummer Bernard Purdie in 1963-1964 being hired as a studio session drummer. Hogwash, all of it. In a way, perhaps the greatest disservice to Ringo was the first, at the hands of George Martin, who sidelined the newly minted Beatle in September 1962 for session drummer Andy White for 18 takes of Love Me Do, which featured poor Ringo demoted to tambourine percussion. Apparently, it was not uncommon for bands to use what were considered specialized studio drummers who were more familiar with the studio environment and its pressures. Could you imagine? For some reason, people key in on the lack of John Bonham craziness or the mania of Keith Moon drum fills and assume that it means that there is something in fact lacking. But that is simply not true, as they are confusing it with the egoless strength required to exercise such strength, and that's because Ringo was always in service to whatever the song needed. It's often said that a band is only as good as its drummer, for the drummer is the heartbeat and the foundation on which the whole band stands, through timing and through rhythm. Even bands without drummers still need this. It just comes from other places. Another huge element that makes a band gel is its chemistry. You have personality-relationship chemistry, and then there is musical chemistry. You see this often through lore or gossip or a mixture of both, that many notable bands can't actually stand each other, and yet they stay together for the secret sauce that is their musical chemistry. It is a chemistry that is hard to come by and not easily replaceable most of the time. For the Beatles, Ringo was a key component in both the band's personality-relationship chemistry as well as the musical side of things. Ringo being in service to whatever the song needs was crucial to the songs themselves. An analogy that you may or may not agree with is that songs can be like recipes for food. They are made up of specific ingredients in an appropriately measured proportions in order to achieve whatever might be the balance or lack of balance of flavors. What happens when you add too much salt or too little salt? Ringos Parts so thoroughly melt into the song that you wouldn't even notice them, or the opposite, where you might be able to identify a song solely by Ringo's drum part. In some circumstances, his parts seem to key in on the vocal melodies and the lyrical phrasing. In this way, he was the perfect songwriter's drummer. For as you know, a song is technically constituted by melody as the musical work and the lyrics as the literary work. Check out this example. Look at the bongos and the wooden blocks on And I Love Her off of A Hard Day's Night. They're signature to the whole sound of the track. If you remove everything but those blocks or those bongos, you will still be able to identify the track instantly, as much as through the melody or the lyrics. In the case of Because off of Abbey Road, you won't even hear Ringo's influence, as Ringo simply patted his hands on his thighs in a darkened, candlelit studio session to keep time, while John, Paul, and George laid down triple harmony backing vocals. Those crucial hand pats never even made it onto the recording. He was just there to keep time like a good team player. No matter how minimalist Ringo's contributions could be, it was always in service to whatever best fit the song, and not about the drumming standing out in the live mix, or the studio recording, or having the spotlight solo at concerts. In fact, oddly enough, in the Beatles, that seemed to come by way of singing lead on a song, especially for Ringo. It would be Ringo's second lead song, I Wanna Be Your Man, off of With the Beatles, that would give the Rolling Stones their first #1 success. To me, it exemplifies the greatness of Lennon and McCartney, something that the Stones still chase to this day, in my opinion. Another part of Ringo's mythology lies in his kit and how he approached playing it, as Ringo was a lefty playing a right-handed kit. If there's a slight delay in how long it takes you to hit the drum because you're a righty compensating for a lefty or a lefty compensating for a righty, it's going to affect the sound that you might conventionally get from your kit, which in turn is going to influence the parts and how they're played and how they're come up with. On the surface, being a lefty playing a right-handed kit could be seen as a restraint or a handicap, but with the right individual like Ringo, who can circumvent the obstacle, it will lead to innovation. And then there's Ringo's grip, the way that he gripped his drumsticks. Up to that point, most drummers used a traditional grip with antiquated practicality that goes back to the days of drumming boys marching in armies and needing to adjust their grip so that they could better hit their drum while marching. It looked something like this. Notice how one of my sticks is horizontal. Ringo employed and popularized the match grip. That's where you hold both sticks as so, like you're used to seeing. This was partially done in order to hit the drums hard enough so that they could be heard over the screaming girls during live shows. In February of 1964, 73 million people watched Ringo use that match grip on the Beatles' first Ed Sullivan performance. Every kid that went on to play the drums because of that performance did so with the match grip, just like the one they saw Ringo using on their TVs, modernizing and reforming how drums are hit all the way to this very day. Ringo would use that match grip to go on and create all sorts of unique out-of-the-box parts on songs like Ticket to Ride or Come Together. Another thing we have to talk about is Ringo's bizarre and revolutionary drumming on Tomorrow Never Knows off of Revolver. This led to much confusion as it was believed to be a drum loop, when it is actually Ringo playing the same part over and over, effectively creating an organic, living drum loop. This is something that must have taken great discipline, restraint, focus, and skill. Could you imagine Keith Moon or John Bonham playing on it? What would it have sounded like? Author and Beatles historian Mark Lewinson is an individual who is breathing rarefied air, as he is one of the few, if any, outsiders to listen and catalog all of the Beatles recording tracks from 1962 to 1970. In his research, he noted that Ringo was not only proficient and consistent, but that there were fewer than a dozen or so instances where Ringo was responsible for a take falling apart. It was always because of John, Paul, or George. Ringo was a human metronome capable of taking on the same track over and over and over again. In the case of the George Harrison song Not Guilty, that would be over 100 takes over a 2-day session. Collectively, the Beatles would become masters in the recording studio as they pioneered and in some cases invented many techniques that are now considered to be tried and true gold standards of modern music recording. For Ringo, he began to muffle his unique calfskin drums using anything from tea towels to cigarette packs in order to attenuate and obtain a sound that could really fit the song. He was also one of the first drummers to tune his kit down in opposition to jazz standards of the day. Breaking the rules is how you create new ones. Without Ringo, they might have been great, but the Beatles simply would not have been the Beatles, and it's way past time to look past all of the nonsense and give Ringo Starr the due that he is owed. If you were fascinated by this video and its subject, I would suggest you head over to Abley House Lessons and Isolated Tracks and check out how they brilliantly break down and isolate many of the Beatles songs, as well as Ringo's drum parts. A link to that channel is in the description of this video. And as always, please make sure to like, share, subscribe. You can also join our membership here on YouTube, link for that below, or check out the Patreon. Once again, thank you so much for tuning in, and that's all I got. Until next time, as Ringo would say, peace and love, peace and love, peace and love, peace and love.